A highly regarded judge hands down a 60-year sentence to a young man he believes committed the crime, but when an overlooked piece of evidence resurfaces, it uncovers a network of corruption so vast that it rattles the entire legal system. The courtroom in Fresno, California, was full that day. The atmosphere was thick, not just from the summer heat, but from the gravity of the judgment that was moments from being handed down. Every eye was locked on Judge Malcolm Brewer, a man whose authority was well known. He wasn't recognized for leniency or forgiveness. His rulings were decisive, stern, and to most beyond question. At 62, with 35 years of judicial service behind him, his features were as hardened as his sentences, a symbol of the many lives altered by his decisive gavel. Standing at the defense table was 24-year old Ryan Hale, his hands subtly shaking though his gaze didn't waver. His face held the look of someone who spent years trying to be believed. Ryan had always asserted his innocence even during the moment of his arrest for an armed jewelry store robbery that left a man in critical condition. But today, his words would carry no weight. "Mr. Hale," Judge Brewer began, his deep voice commanding attention, "you've been found guilty by a jury of your peers for acts that have caused permanent damage to this community. Your behavior was not only dangerous, it was deliberate, and you've shown no sign of regret." Ryan's mother, sitting near the back, choked on a quiet sob. She had pleaded with the court to look beyond the charges and see the son she raised, a boy who once dreamed of fighting fires, not standing trial. But the prosecution's case had been compelling: eyewitnesses, video footage, and an anonymous tip that sealed his fate. "I hereby sentence you to 60 years in state prison," Judge Brewer declared, bringing his gavel down against the wood. The sharp crack echoed, a sound of finality. Ryan didn't move. His lips tightened, holding back words he knew would be useless. Around him, the courtroom stirred gasps, whispers, and reporters scrambling to capture every detail. But for Ryan, everything had gone still. He turned once more to meet his mother's eyes before being taken away. The metallic clink of his chains trailed off as he disappeared down the corridor. Judge Brewer stepped back into his chambers, closing the door to muffle the courtroom's lingering echoes. He poured himself a strong cup of coffee, his eyes fixed on the dark swirl in the mug, as though it might offer clarity. It had been a grueling day, but in his mind, justice had been delivered, or so he believed. What he didn't realize was that the truth he thought he'd silenced was already stirring, preparing to rise, unrelenting and unavoidable. The case had become infamous, earning headlines across every local news outlet. Dubbed the Hale robbery trial, it captured the public's attention for weeks. The crime itself was dramatic. A masked assailant stormed Carter's Jewelers in bustling downtown Fresno one Thursday afternoon, waving a gun and making off with more than $150,000 in merchandise. In the chaos, a clerk named Samuel Gaines was critically injured during the gunfire. Ryan Hale, a 24-year-old part-time mechanic with a clean record, was taken into custody 2 weeks after the incident. Police were tipped off by an anonymous source claiming Ryan resembled the suspect seen fleeing the scene. Prosecutors presented a compelling narrative linking him directly to the crime. They tied him to stolen items found in a storage unit under his name. His court-appointed lawyer struggled to poke holes in the prosecution's story. Evidence mounted against Ryan: blurry surveillance footage of someone with a similar body type and walk, multiple witnesses who insisted they recognized his voice, and the most damaging element, fingerprints on the discarded firearm found at the scene. Still, Ryan never wavered. "I didn't do this," he told the jury from the stand. "I wasn't anywhere near that store. I've never held a gun in my life." His defense hinged on an alibi, that he was working an extended shift at the auto shop. But that defense collapsed when his employer confessed under oath that he couldn't confirm Ryan's whereabouts for the entire day. The prosecution's final argument was cutting and confident. This is someone who thought he could beat the system. The district attorney asserted, pacing in front of the jury, but the evidence is clear. The fingerprints don't lie. The witnesses don't lie. In stark contrast, Ryan's defense appeared weak and uncertain. Nearly defeated, members of the jury, his attorney implored, "There are inconsistencies in this case, uncertainties. Isn't that reason enough to extend reasonable doubt to this young man?" But his tone lacked force, and the jury remained unconvinced. Their discussion was brief, under 3 hours. Before the verdict came, guilty on all charges, Ryan remained still as the decision was read, yet the clench of his jaw betrayed the emotional storm within. Judge Brewer, unwavering as always, readied himself to deliver what he believed was a just sentence. He'd encountered countless criminals in his courtroom, men skilled in deception, and to him, Ryan seemed no different. His eyes scanned the room, then locked on Ryan's, as if searching for the faintest sign of guilt or repentance. When the punishment was finally declared, it was as though the courtroom released a collective breath. For the victims and their families, it brought solace. For Ryan and his mother, devastation. The law had rendered its decision, and it was merciless. Yet as Judge Brewer signed off on the sentencing later that night, a flicker of doubt surfaced, a strange discomfort he couldn't identify. He brushed it aside, blaming exhaustion. What Brewer didn't realize was that this trial had merely been the prologue. The real truth was hiding in plain sight, and it was on the verge of revealing itself. It all began one uneventful Wednesday evening. Judge Brewer sat in his personal study, the soft glow of his desk lamp spilling across piles of case files and legal documents. Retirement had been crossing his mind more frequently, but tonight's work demanded focus. A new matter, involving potential police misconduct, had reached his desk serious enough to require close scrutiny. As he flipped through the materials, something unusual caught his attention, an evidence report from an older investigation. Initially, it seemed insignificant, just another entry among many. Then a name jumped out at him, Ryan Hale. Brewer leaned back, puzzled. It wasn't rare for names to repeat across cases, but this time it felt peculiar. Turning to the next page, his heartbeat quickened. The document outlined the contents of a police evidence locker items seized during a different robbery case that occurred around the same period as the Carter's Jewelers incident. One particular item drew his attention, a firearm. Its description matched the weapon used in the robbery that had led to Ryan's conviction. The troubling part, this gun had never been presented as evidence during Ryan's trial. In fact, there was no mention of it whatsoever. Judge Brewer leaned closer, the gravity of what he'd found beginning to settle in. He checked the serial number against the trial records, still vivid in his mind. It was a perfect match. The same model, identical markings on the barrel. Yet the file stated that this gun had been confiscated during a different arrest, 2 days after the robbery took place. How is that even possible? He murmured, his thoughts racing as the implications began to form. If this weapon had already been in police hands, it couldn't have been the one used in the Carter's Jewelers heist. And if it wasn't, then whose prints had been lifted from it? Something didn't add up. Brewer had navigated the intricate maze of the legal system for decades, and understood how crucial details could easily be overlooked, or deliberately hidden, but this didn't feel like oversight. It seemed deliberate. Determined to uncover the truth, he ordered the complete file for the unrelated robbery case. It arrived the following morning, a thick packet stuffed with reports, photos, and witness statements. The further he read, the more troubling the picture became. The officer who made the arrest in the unrelated case, the very same detective who had testified against Ryan. Then there was the anonymous phone tip that had once seemed like a routine part of the case. Brewer had thought nothing of it at the time, but now it stood out like a red flag. He filed for a subpoena to access the tip line's records, his discomfort mounting by the minute. When the documents finally came through, they confirmed his worst fears. The tip hadn't come from a concerned citizen. It was traced to a burner phone, one registered under that same detective's name. As the reality dawned, Brewer felt the walls of his office tightening around him. Ryan Hale had been framed, the evidence had been fabricated, the testimony had been part of a setup. His stomach turned at the thought of the 60-year sentence he had pronounced, at the life of a young man that might have been destroyed unjustly. Judge Brewer had always believed in the integrity of the law, but now it felt as though the ground beneath him was sinking. One thing, however, was clear. He had to take action. Yet the road ahead was lined with obstacles. As the weight of his discovery settled in, Brewer made a decision. He would pursue the truth, whatever the consequences. He couldn't allow it to vanish now. Judge Brewer had barely slept since finding the irregularities in Ryan Hale's conviction. His mornings were buried in piles of legal files, and his nights ended with a journal full of rushed, anxious notes. But the more he unearthed, the bleaker it looked. The first breakthrough came during a quiet meeting with an old friend, former investigator Daniel Hayes, at a dim roadside diner off Highway 99. Brewer laid everything out. Hayes, known for his blunt style and uncanny ability to sniff out wrongdoing, listened carefully. "This isn't just sloppy police work, Malcolm," Hayes said, pushing his coffee away. "If your information's accurate, someone made sure that kid went down for this." Brewer gave a tight nod. "I need real evidence, Dan. Ironclad." Hayes agreed to join the investigation. Within days, they were knee-deep in department records, interview transcripts, and internal communications. What surfaced was disturbing. Forged documents, missing entries from evidence logs, and witness accounts edited to support the prosecution's case. One witness stood out to Brewer, a shop employee who had first pointed to someone else as the culprit, only to later change his story and blame Ryan. Hayes tracked him to a rundown apartment on the town's outskirts. When they questioned him, the man broke down. "I didn't want to lie," he admitted, his voice shaking. "But Detective Lewis said if I didn't say what he told me, I'd be arrested for obstruction. I didn't see another way." The name, Detective Lewis, hit Brewer like a gut punch. He was the same officer behind the phony tip and the missing weapon. As Brewer and Hayes pulled the thread, a pattern emerged. Lewis had a reputation for shady behavior, bullying witnesses, falsifying documents, and forcing confessions. Yet his file was spotless, protected by layers of red tape and silence. The turning point came when Hayes managed to retrieve erased emails from Lewis's department account. One message, in particular, jumped out. It had been sent to the district attorney and outlined a strategy to guarantee a conviction in the Carter's Jewelers trial. Attached was a compilation of forged evidence and altered witness testimonies reading the email. Brewer's anger surged. The justice system he'd spent his life defending was corrupted from within, but he couldn't allow himself to be overwhelmed. He now had the evidence required to act, though revealing the truth wouldn't come easily. Lewis had influential supporters inside the department, and Brewer was well aware that going public could jeopardize everything: his profession, reputation, even his well-being. Yet he couldn't shake the image of Ryan Hale behind bars for a crime he hadn't committed. And so the choice was obvious. "We take it public," Brewer told Hayes one evening as they combed through documents. Whatever the cost. The following morning, Brewer submitted a motion to reopen Ryan's trial, including incriminating material on Lewis. The court was rocked by the submission, but Brewer wasn't stopping there. He also filed a formal grievance with the Department of Justice demanding a third-party inquiry into Lewis and the Fresno Police Department. The reaction came quickly. Anonymous threats flooded in. Urging him to let it go, his peers began keeping their distance, and news outlets started speculating about his intent. But Brewer held his ground. The truth was no longer hidden, and retreating wasn't an option. However, as tensions rose around him, Brewer saw that the true war had only just begun. Most difficult challenges still lay ahead. The consequences of Brewer's legal move were swift and volatile. Local media erupted with headlines accusing the Fresno police of systemic misconduct, and public fury ignited across the city. For the first time in years, Brewer felt himself under the microscope. Some praised his courage in exposing injustice, others branded him as a betrayer of the very system he once protected. But the backlash wasn't limited to words. He began receiving strange calls late at night, only silence before abrupt disconnection. One morning, he stepped outside to find his tires punctured. A crude warning etched on his windshield: quit now or suffer. Brewer had understood there were dangers in revealing the truth, but he hadn't anticipated how quickly the threats would become real. Still, he refused to back down. He had witnessed too many lives unravel because of deep-rooted institutional flaws he now faced head-on. Ryan Hale's image lingered in his mind, young, determined, and tragically resigned to a punishment he hadn't earned. Meanwhile, Detective Lewis wasn't about to go down quietly. His lawyer issued a statement denying all accusations, framing Brewer's motion as a personal attack meant to ruin a decorated career. "This is nothing but a witch hunt," Lewis claimed in a televised interview, his composed appearance sharply contrasting with the mounting proof against him. Brewer watched the broadcast from his couch, jaw clenched in anger. The deception was shameless, deliberate, but he held the one thing Lewis didn't: the truth. As the inquiry moved forward, Hayes uncovered a pivotal piece of evidence: security camera footage from a lot near the jewelry store, recorded on the day of the heist. This footage, inexplicably absent from the original trial, showed a man closely resembling Lewis leaving the area carrying a duffel bag. Brewer's heart raced as he played the video. It wasn't just a new lead, it was a bombshell. It didn't just support Ryan's innocence, it pointed the finger directly at Lewis. With the final puzzle piece in hand, the next move was obvious, though risky. Brewer filed for an emergency court hearing to present the newly found evidence. Tension gripped the room as the video played across a large screen. The audience held their breath, and audible gasps followed as the truth became undeniable. "This man," Brewer said, motioning to the video still, "is the same detective who led the case against Ryan Hale. He fabricated evidence, pressured witnesses, and framed an innocent man to hide his own crimes." The courtroom erupted. Journalists scrambled to document every second, camera flashes strobing like lightning. Lewis, seated beside his lawyer, had turned ashen but still clung to his bravado. "You're making a terrible mistake, Brewer," he muttered bitterly as officers cuffed him. "You have no idea what you've started." The moment rattled Brewer, but he stood firm. The matter was now in the hands of a higher court, and Ryan Hale's sentence was now under review. But Brewer understood this was just the start. It marked the opening of a broader, deeper fight. As the courtroom cleared, he grasped the gravity of what had come to light. The truth had finally surfaced, but the pursuit of real justice was far from done. Weeks later, Judge Brewer found himself once again inside the same courtroom where Ryan had once stood to be condemned. Only now, the atmosphere had changed. The gallery filled with journalists, advocates, and Ryan's loved ones, all awaiting the ruling from the judge overseeing the retrial. Ryan appeared thinner, visibly marked by prison, yet he sat tall at the defense table, his body still, his gaze fixed and calm. Brewer swallowed hard, watching the young man who had become the heart of this battle, who had suffered so much for a crime he didn't commit. The new evidence Brewer and Hayes had uncovered left no doubt: video surveillance, tampered reports, testimonies under duress, all pointing to a deliberate frame job, one that hid the real perpetrators. When the judge delivered the decision vacating Ryan's conviction, the courtroom erupted in cheers and tears. Ryan stood, hands shaking, as his mother ran to hug him, and for a brief second, everything stood still. Brewer, seated in the back, allowed himself a quiet, rare smile. Justice had been reclaimed, though not without sacrifice. In the days that followed, the repercussions spread quickly. Detective Lewis was charged for his misconduct, and an independent probe into the Fresno Police Department uncovered years of unchecked corruption. The case became a national flashpoint for change, with Brewer's efforts symbolizing a call for justice system reform, even with praise coming in. Brewer remained thoughtful. He knew this win was just one small step. The legal system he had once believed in was broken, but it wasn't beyond fixing, and he resolved to spend the rest of his days working to restore it. And for Ryan, his future was just opening. Finally free of the weight of a false sentence, he made a promise to himself to devote his life helping others who had been wrongfully incarcerated. His journey became a symbol of perseverance and a testament to the enduring pursuit of truth. The case of Ryan Hale and Judge Brewer serves as a stark reminder: the justice system isn't flawless. It demands constant oversight, bravery, and the resolve to face hard realities. If this story touched you, consider supporting groups committed to freeing the innocent and pushing for meaningful legal reform. And be sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that both uplift and challenge how we view justice. Because the battle for what's right doesn't always conclude in the courtroom. Sometimes that's exactly where it starts.